بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على النبي الكريم وبعد. Moving on of the booklet Al-Aqidah Al-Wasitiyyah, the booklet written by the author Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. And we mentioned his works are works that are one of a kind. Just hearing that it was written and authored by Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah gives some weight to the book. Just his name, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted him acceptance worldwide, to the extent that his own enemies attested to his virtue. وَالْفَضْلُ مَا شَهِدَتْ بِهِ الْأَعْدَاءُ. That is the real virtue and reality. That even people that speak ill of him and have hatred towards his call, they have his books on their shelves of their libraries. And this is a virtue that cannot be denied, and is a fact that many witness to up until today. So moving on with the meaning of Aqidah, we took that the prominent or the standard meaning of Aqidah is the 6 pillars of Iman. Many of the scholars, when they clarify Aqidah, they say, هُوَ أَن تُؤْمِنَ بِاللَّهِ وَمَلَائِكَتِهِ وَكُتُبِهِ وَرُسُلِهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَبِالْقَدْرِ خَيْرِهِ وَشَرِّهِ. As the author has mentioned, to believe in Allah, and to believe in His angels, and to believe in His books, and to believe in His messengers, and to believe in the last day. And here the author says, to believe in after death will be resurrection. And also to believe in the ordainment of Allah, the decree, the good and the bad of it, the sweet of it and the bitter of it. So he says, Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, وَمِنَ الْإِيمَانِ بِاللَّهِ, from believing in Allah, from the first pillar of the Iman, is to believe in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described Himself with. And we're going to allow the brother to read the translation shortly, but we're just going to give a layout, or labas, a layout of what was intended in last session with the introduction, that from the first pillar of Iman, to believe in Allah is to believe in His existence, al-Iman bi-wujudihi, and to believe in rububiyyatihi, His lordship, and to believe in uluhiyyatihi, that He's deserving of worship, and also to believe in His names and attributes. This is the part that we're going to focus on from the first pillar of Iman. Since the author was in a time that this topic indeed was a matter of dispute, it was a controversial topic, and being that it was a need for it to be clarified, he specified it from the belief of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also it's from the greatest sciences regarding Aqidah. For verily, man kana li rabbihi a'raf, kana li rabbihi akhwaf. The one that has more knowledge about his Lord, then he has the most fear of his Lord. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهِ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. Verily those who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from His servants are those who have knowledge. They have ilm. The more you know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of His beautiful names and attributes, the more fear that you have for Him. And one of the reasons why some of the ayats in the Quran was given the title of being the greatest ayah in the Quran, because it comprised and entailed the attributes of Allah. Such as Ayatul Kursi. The scholar said one of the reasons why it was called the greatest ayah in the Quran, because it entails the meanings and the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As well, Surah Al-Ikhlas, the reason why it was given the description of the third of the Quran, or that equates Thuluth al-Quran. It equates the third of the Quran because, as the Prophet ﷺ said, Hiya wasfur Rahman. It is a description of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this topic is incumbent that each one of us be on search. In fact, it concerns us to learn from the names of Allah and His attributes. Shaykh Islam Al-Albani rahimahullah, he says, لا يعذر أحد. No one is to be excused who lives amongst people who teach this creed, the names and attributes of Allah, and then he says, I don't have knowledge of Tawheed, Asma wa Sifat. But a man that lives on the outskirts or far from the people or just recently accepted Islam, here he may be excused. But a person who lives amongst the Salafiyin, he attends their session, he said he's not to be excused of being ignorant of the science. Asma wa Sifat. So, this topic, it has been attacked from within the ranks. The topic of the beautiful names and attributes of Allah. It was not only that the polytheists and the mushrikeen, they used to object to some of the names and attributes of Allah. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ اسْجُدُوا لِلرَّحْمَنِ قَالُوا وَمَا الرَّحْمَنُ. When it said to them, prostrate and be submissive to Rahman, they say, وَمَا الرَّحْمَنِ. What is this name, Ar-Rahman? They used to object to it. So some of the mushrikeen of the early ones, they never used to believe in the Tawheed of the beautiful names and attributes of Allah. And we're going to give a beautiful definition that Shaykh Abdul Rahman bin Nasir al-Sa'di gave of what is Tawheed, Asma wa Sifat. Many of us, we've studied Tawheed of Rububiyyah, Tawheed Uluhiyyah, but we find that we're lacking knowledge of this field. Here, Shaykh Abdul Rahman bin Nasir al-Sa'di rahimahullah, he says, to single Allah out in His beautiful names and attributes is to believe that He has the absolute perfection in all of His attributes, and that no one else is a partner of Him of any of those perfection and attributes. So a person could summarize it to say, it is to affirm complete perfection for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from all angles, from the utmost beautiful attributes and names, and that this is specific to Him alone. So this is Tawheed, Asma wa Sifat. And we're going to start off with this topic. And there are three main groups that their name may come up within the class. We're going to mention the first one, the group or the sect called the Jahmiyyah, and a second sect called the Mu'tazila, and a third sect that we will mention maybe at the end of the class or later on in further sessions, upcoming sessions inshallah. The first sect is called the Jahmiyyah. And the reason why these names may come up, because they are the sect, they're the firq that have polluted the belief of Ahlus-Sunnahwaljamaah concerning Asma wa Sifat, the names and attributes of Allah. And they're both two groups that have been affected by people that have no connection to Islam whatsoever. If you look at the chain of who they took knowledge from, it perhaps leads to a man that is an enemy to the Prophet ﷺ, or a man that tried to harm the Prophet ﷺ. So this group, the sect Jahmiyyah, the initial founder is a man named Ja'ad bin Dirham. Ja'ad bin Dirham. He's originally from the area of Iran, Khurasan, and later on he grew up in Damascus, and he used to take knowledge from some of the Salaf al-Salih. If you look from his mashayikh, some of the Salaf al-Salih. But at the same time, where he grew up was in a village where there were many Christians of Nasara there, and people that were into philosophy. So he was from a young one that was affected at a young age of philosophy, and then he began to seek knowledge from some of the narrators of hadith. So when they would narrate to him narrations concerning the names and attributes of Allah, such as Allah having eyes, he would respond and say, does Allah have eyes? Objecting. So the narrator by the name Wahab bin Munabbih, he responded by saying, I only convey to you what Allah has conveyed to us regarding Himself. That if it wasn't for the fact that Allah has informed us that He has eyes, I wouldn't have said that He has eyes. So this is the first man, Ja'ad bin Dirham. As you mentioned, at a young age he was polluted with having beliefs of philosophy, and he was amazed of himself, being very articulate. And from there he would accompany people that had disbelief within their Islam, and from that state he began to increase in doubts, to the point that the scholar said he was the first to deny the attributes of Allah. And he was from the 200th century. The 200th century after migration of the Prophet ﷺ. So the first to come with the innovation of denying and not believing correctly of the names and attributes of Allah was a man named Ja'ad bin Dirham. He claimed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala لم يتخذ إبراهيم خليلا وَلَمْ يُكَلِّمْ مُوسَى تَكْلِيمًا. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not take Ibrahim as a close companion, and that He did not speak to Musa alayhi salam. So one of the rulers found in those regions of Iraq by the name Khalid al-Qasri, on the day of Eid al-Adha, he was given a sentence of a death sentence for his disbelief. At that time, if a person comes with opposition to the belief of the early ones, that they would give him a death sentence. So he gave the Eid khutbah of Adha, and he placed Ja'ad bin Dirham lying in front of him at the first step of the minbar. So he gave his khutbah, and then he said, may Allah accept ضحاياكم فإني مضحي بجعد بن درهم. He said, "O people, in this day of Eid, where people are going to make a sacrifice, may Allah accept your sacrifice. I'm going to make a sacrifice of Ja'ad bin Dirham." So he went down, and there then he did the death sentence for him in front of everyone. And he mentioned, لأنه قال أن الله لم يتخذ إبراهيم خليلا ولم يكلم موسى تكليما. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not take Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam as a close companion, and He didn't speak to Musa, meaning that he denied the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there then, he was beheaded in front of the masses of the public. This is the first man that came with the innovation of denying the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even though we find now modern day speakers that try to defend this man and say that he didn't intend any harm. All he intended was to explain different figurative meanings of the word Khalil and so on. We find this. People nowadays, they're du'at al-abwab jahannam, callers at the gate doors of the hellfire. At the gates of the hellfire. So this is the first man. He's the initial founder of the sect Jahmiyyah. So why was it ascribed to Jahm bin Safwan? Jahm bin Safwan took from this man called Ja'ad bin Dirham. He was the one that professed this belief openly in the last part of the 200th century, after the death of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, the Khalifa. And he as well was given a death sentence, Jahm bin Safwan. The next sect was Al-Mu'tazila. Mu'tazila has a lot in common with the sect of Jahmiyyah and their beliefs of denying the attributes of Allah, even before that, denying the names of Allah, saying that it's mere words, it has no meanings. The sect Mu'tazila the founder of it was a man named Wasil bin Ata. I'll just do an introduction before we get into the booklet, inshallah. Because we're going to mention these sects often, it's good to know who they are. Wasil bin Ata. Wasil bin Ata is a student of Hasan al-Basri. He studied with him for 4 to 5 years in the southern part of Iraq. Wasil bin Ata, this man, he remained with Hasan al-Basri, and they would always describe him that he was a man of silence. And they used to say his silence was scary. Was a silence that was deadly. Either he has something with him of doubts that he doesn't want to profess. So it was a state that Hasan al-Basri used to perceive that he has with him beliefs that if he speaks, he's going to announce it there then. So he would isolate himself at the pillars of the masjid. Wasil bin Ata. There was a time that Hasan al-Basri, in a circle, mentioned that the one who falls into major sins is a man who is a believer, but he's in sin. So there then Wasil bin Ata finally spoke, objected. He said, no, he's not a Muslim nor a disbeliever. And he said, manzila bayna manzilatayn. He's in a stage between the two stages, Islam and Kufr. So there then it was said that Hasan al-Basri requested for his absence from the masjid, that he be removed from the masjid. So he would, after him isolating himself, the word Mu'tazila meaning those who isolate themselves from the gathering of Hasan al-Basri. So after him isolating himself, the one that was his brother-in-law, Amr bin Ubayd, and his sister Amr bin Ubayd was married to Wasil bin Ata. He began to join him in his circles, the private circles that they used to have, where they used to come with these type of beliefs concerning the names and attributes of Allah. And the thing about Wasil bin Ata, he was a man that was very eloquent, can articulate, even though he had a deficiency in his tongue. He said, kana athlaq. The meaning of athlaq is that he wasn't able to pronounce certain letters. So he gave a khutbah once, a whole khutbah, and he avoided the letter Ra in the whole khutbah. He started with praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the end of it. Every single part of the khutbah did not contain the letter Ra. And when they would tell him, recite the Quran, he would recite the Quran bil-ma'na, with the meaning. He said it's permissible to recite the Quran with the meaning. He didn't want to admit that he had a deficiency and he couldn't be one that utters the recitation of the Quran. So even at the last part, when we say Astaghfirullah li wa lakum, he avoided the ra and says Asta'tibullah li wa lakum. He was so articulate that he can even change certain words to mean the same of Astaghfirullah li wa lakum. At the end of the khutbah, usually people say, or the middle part. So this man, with his eloquence, he deceived many. And he continued to spread his belief. And with his brother-in-law, Amr bin Ubayd, they continued being from the founders of the group called Mu'tazila. So Mu'tazila and the Jahmiyyah, what they have in common is that they both deny the attributes of Allah. The Jahmiyyah is a little bit worse from the angle that they deny even the names of Allah by saying it's words, mere words that have no meaning whatsoever. Whereas the Mu'tazila affirm the names but deny the attributes. And they say that the same people that Jahm bin Safwan was polluted with were the same people that corrupted Wasil bin Ata. They lived at the same era. The founder of the Mu'tazila and the founder of the Jahmiyyah. So they say there's a possibility that they took from the same people of philosophy that corrupted their beliefs. Do not think that the creed of Islam is not targeted. The people, the enemies of Islam from outside, they attack people within so they can become those who spread their beliefs on their behalf under the name of Islam. And this is what happened. That they were attacking Islam from within by people who they corrupted. So these two groups, the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila, were from the early groups that came with this innovation. Was it from the first? Was it the first innovation that happened in Islam? No. It happened in the 200 year after migration, a little bit after that. I believe a little bit after or a little bit before. The man of the second founder of the Mu'tazila, Amr bin Ubayd. We're trying to get used to these names, inshallah. Who was the first person that we mentioned, the first founder of the Jahmiyyah? He said Jahm bin Safwan, is that correct? Ja'ad bin Dirham. He's the initial founder of the belief of the Jahmiyyah, of denying the names and attributes of Allah. But the one who took from him and propagated his belief and became renowned for it was Jahm bin Safwan. The next group, Al-Mu'tazila. Who was the founder of it? Who was the founder, Mu'assis Al-Mu'tazila? Wasil bin Ata. From the students of Hasan al-Basri. Studied from 4 to 5 years. And his brother-in-law was as well a second founder of the group, Mu'tazila. His name is Amr bin Ubayd. He's the man that said about the hadith that the fetus is in the womb of the mother for this hadith, the fetus of the womb of the mother for 40 days. He said about this hadith, if I were to hear this from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, لَرَدَّدْتُ, I would have rejected it. And he said, if I heard this hadith from Allah, I would have said, لَيْسَ عَلَى هَذَا أَخَذْنَا الْمِثَاقَ أَخَذْتَ الْمِثَاقَ عَلَيْنَا. This is not what we took the covenant for your sake, O Allah. He would have rejected in front of Allah. This is the people that are from the founders of the group, Mu'tazila. He started off with the first narrator, who narrated the hadith. Amash, he says, لَوْ سَمِعْتُهُ مِنْ أَعْمَشْ لَكَذَّبْتُ. If I were to hear from the narrator Amash, I would have declared him to be a liar. And then the next person, he says, and if I were to hear from Zayd ibn Wahab, لَمَا أَحْبَبْتُ, I would have never loved him. And then he said after that, and if I were to hear it from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, لَمَا قَبِلْتُهُ, and if I were to hear from the narrator, the Sahabi Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, I would never accept it. And then he goes, if I were to even hear it from the Prophet ﷺ, I would have rejected it. Then he doesn't stop there. And he goes, even if I were to hear this hadith from Allah, I would have said, this is not the covenant that you took upon us. So these people are people of known disbelief and have real hatred to Islam. Meaning from within. So we're going to move on, inshallah. We're going to allow to read the translation, and then we're going to go from there. Hold on.
Part of the belief in Allah is the belief in how He has described Himself in His book, the Quran, and in how the Messenger ﷺ has described Him. Belief without distorting or denying, and without questioning or shaping. Rather, belief in Allah that exalted, as Allah says, there is none like Him, He is the all-hearer and all-seeing.
طيب قال الشيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية ومن الإيمان بالله الإيمان بما وصف به نفسه في كتابه العزيز. Shaykh Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he says, from believing in Allah, from having faith in Allah, the first pillar of Iman, is to believe in what He described Himself with in His almighty book. This part, if you notice, he says what Allah described Himself with. And he does not say what Allah named Himself with, but he said what Allah described Himself. So it's one of the two reasons. Either that the topic of the attributes of Allah was more of a dispute than the names of Allah, he specified it to what was found of descriptions of Allah or attributes of Allah. Or the second reason is that every name of Allah composes an attribute, entails an attribute. Every name of Allah has an attribute. For example, when we say Allah is Sami', the all-hearer, He has the attribute of hearing. So because every name has an attribute, Shaykh Islam ibn Taymiyyah goes on to say to believe in what Allah described Himself with in His noble book. And here is a principle that's being laid out for us. The first principle, for those who want to write it down in this part, is that أَنَّ أَسْمَاءَ اللَّهِ تَوْقِفِيَّةً, that the names and attributes of Allah are restricted to the text. There's no such thing of intellectual proofs when it comes to the names and attributes of Allah. There's no such thing of ru'ya malamat. For example, a person were to say, we had a dream interpretation from the names of Allah, this or that. Or a person were to narrate from wise men that have no narrations to the Prophet ﷺ. We say the names and attributes of Allah are restricted to the text. That's the first principle that we're going to take today. It says, وَإِنَّهَا فِي الْحَقِّ تَوْقِفِيَّةٌ وَلَنَا بِذَا أَدِلَّةٌ وَفِيَّةٌ. In reality, these names and attributes of Allah are restricted to the text. They're textual and they're not intellectual. Meaning they have to be based either upon قال Allah or قال Rasul, one or the other. And the case for that is because there's no other way of knowing the name or attributes of Allah except by means of revelation. There's no room or scope for intellect to be found therein. الإيمان بما وصف به نفسه في كتابه العزيز وبما وصف به رسوله محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. So Imam Ahmed, he says, here they mention a narration of Imam Ahmed as a side benefit, that we believe in what Allah described Himself with and what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam described himself with, or described Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with. We stop at the Quran and the Hadith. There's no third to it. So this topic is that we affirm what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala affirmed from Himself, and what His Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam affirmed from. Here it says, بِمَا وَصَفَ بِهِ نَفْسَهُ فِي كِتَابِهِ الْعَزِيزِ. The word نَفْسَهُ, Himself. We use this word a lot, referring to Allah Himself. At times, it means His essence, and at times it actually means Himself as an attribute of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. What Isa ibn Maryam says in Surah Al-Ma'idah, تَعْلَمُ مَا فِي نَفْسِي وَلَا أَعْلَمُ مَا فِي نَفْسِكَ. You know what is in myself, or my inner self, and I do not know what is in your inner self. So we affirm the self, or the inner self of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also we affirm the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وبما وصف به رسول محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم من غير تحريف ولا تعطيل ومن غير تكييف ولا تمثيل. Without any tahrif. This is the first terminology that we're going to learn, inshallah. من غير تحريف. Without distorting the wording or the meaning. من غير تحريف, because distorting could either be distorting the wording. And how could you distort the wording from the names of Allah? Who can give us an example? Either by increasing a letter. I tell you, يعني the ayah, Ar-Rahmanu ala al-arsh istawa. Allah risen over the throne. Istawa. He comes and he adds a lam. He says, Ar-Rahmanu ala al-arsh istawla. Here he added a letter. This is a form of distortion to the wording by an increase. And he says, instead of Allah arising over His throne, they say Allah conquered His throne, as if it was never in His kingdom or His power before, that He had to conquer it. So this is from their distortion. As well, it can be by decreasing a letter. By decreasing a letter from the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or either by altering the vowels. I read you the ayah, وَكَلَّمَ اللَّهُ مُوسَى تَكْلِيمًا. Instead of even one of the founders of the Mu'tazila, he went up to a qari. He says, when you recite this ayah, وَكَلَّمَ اللَّهُ مُوسَى تَكْلِيمًا, don't say وَكَلَّمَ اللَّهُ. Say وَكَلَّمَ اللَّهَ مُوسَى تَكْلِيمًا. Musa spoke to Allah, not the other way around. So he told him, okay, what about the other ayah that وَلَمَّا جَاءَ مُوسَى لِمِيقَاتِنَا وَكَلَّمَهُ رَبُّهُ. When Musa came to the appointed destinations and his Lord spoke to him, how are you going to alter this? So he kept quiet. He was silent. So this is from their ways that they distort the wordings, by even changing the vowels, by any means necessary. So you say, وَكَلَّمَ اللَّهَ مُوسَى تَكْلِيمًا. That Musa spoke to Allah, not the other way around. So that's in the wording. Distorting the meaning. For example, I say, وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ. Read the ayah, وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ. Allah came. They say, وَجَاءَ أَمْرُ رَبِّكَ, the command of your Lord came. Or they'll say, وَجَاءَ مَلَكُ رَبِّكَ, the angel of your Lord came. Then when you read the rest of the hadith that comes with that description, it says, وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ, and then it says, أَنَا الْمَلِكُ, I am the king. Is it befitting for an angel to say I'm the king on the day of resurrection? So these people, they distort the meanings. And what's the most common one is the distortion of the meanings. They distort the meanings of the attributes of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. So that's the first term, من غير تحريف. And we're going to mention there's a reason behind why they distort. The next terminology, وَلَا تَعْطِيلٍ, and they don't empty the meanings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I mean, the belief of Ahlus-Sunnahwaljamaah, they don't vacant or empty the meanings of the attributes by doing denial. So ta'til is basically denying the attributes of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Complete denial. So when he says, when you tell him Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala has the attribute of hearing, he tells you no, Allah doesn't have the attribute of hearing. It doesn't even distort. It doesn't give you an interpretation that it means this or that. It totally empties the word of having meanings. The tahrif, the reason why Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah said for the first terminology tahrif, and he didn't say ta'wil. Tahrif, distortion. Ta'wil, interpretation. A figurative interpretation, like a person comes and changes it from the obvious meaning. If he doesn't have a proof, or he has a weak proof, it's called distortion. It's called tahrif. This is what the people of bid'ah used to do. But if you interpretate, you do ta'wil from the obvious meaning because of a proof, or a proof is not the correct proof but it's strong, it's called ta'wil. It's part of a form of tafsir, explaining. So these people, they would distort the names and attributes of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala without having proof or with having a weak proof. The next one, وَلَا تَعْطِيلٍ, denying the names and attributes of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. The third terminology, مِنْ غَيْرِ تَكْيِيفٍ. We're going to be spending some time on these terminologies. Bear with us. مِنْ غَيْرِ تَكْيِيفٍ, without asking the howness or questioning, without inquiring on the natural essence of these attributes. And when we say without asking the howness, we affirm that there is a howness of these attributes, but we don't know of it. Who knows of it? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That the kayfiyah, we affirm it. These people now, when they explain these type of booklets, they say, we negate the howness of it. That's incorrect. We affirm that it has a certain natural essence, how it's carried out, or how the attribute is, but we have no knowledge of it. We refer that knowledge to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And nowadays, even when we speak, we accidentally add certain words to our vocab when addressing Allah or speaking about Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. When we use the word, for example, can you imagine Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala and this and that? Even the word imagination, we're not allowed to use, can you imagine this and that about Allah? It's not allowed for a person to imagine, even if he doesn't utter on his tongue, how the attributes of Allah Ta'ala. He's not even questioning. He's just imagining from within. whenever a person gets that type of doubt within, that he starts to begin to think within his mind about the attributes of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, he should say Allahu Akbar. Why does he say Allahu Akbar? Whatever he thinks of, Allah is greater. Whatever a person comes to mind of thoughts concerning his Lord, then he says Allahu Akbar. They say the dawa, the cure to that is remembering that Allah is greater than whatever you can imagine. And if you do try to come to some sort of reality of how these attributes are, then we say to you, وَمَا قَدَرُ اللَّهَ حَقَّ قَدْرِ. They haven't given Allah His true glorification. And being that our knowledge is limited, there's no way we can know the howness of these attributes. So, وَلَا تَمْثِيل, the next terminology. وَلَا تَمْثِيل, without equating Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to any of His creation. Without equating Allah or His attributes to any of His creation. The reason why Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah began with distortion, because distorting the attribute leads to denying the attribute. He starts with tahrif, distortion, then he starts with ta'til, denying the attribute. Because one leads to the other. When you distort the attributes, in reality you're going to lead yourself to denying the attribute that you have distorted away from. And then he says, مَغَيْرِ تَكْيِيفٍ. He starts with asking about the howness before resembling Allah, before tamtheel. Because when a person starts imagining the howness of the attributes of Allah, it's going to lead him to what, eventually? Resembling Allah to His creation. For verily, whatever you think of within your mind about of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are going to resemble Him at the end to His creation. For verily, you haven't seen Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, and you haven't seen these attributes in their natural essence. So for that reason, you're going to resemble Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala to His creation. So they say, it's summarized by two, ta'til and tamtheel. People are doing one of the two. Either they're denying the attribute of Allah, or either they're resembling Allah to His creation. These four terminologies is rounded up to two. What's the first terminology? Tahrif, distorting. I will mention a few ways of distorting. Tfadal. Adding a letter or removing it as well. Distorting the meaning. Changing the vowels. Taghyir fi shakl. So that's the first terminology. The second terminology, ta'til. What is ta'til again? Denying attributes of Allah. Emptying the attributes from having meanings. So the next one, takyif. Close, That's the other one coming. Takyif. Questioning the howness, the natural essence of these attributes. And we said that leads eventually to what? Tamtheel, equating the attributes of Allah to the attributes of His creation. So when we summarize, we say it is two terminologies indeed. Tamtheel, equating or resembling Allah to His creation. Because remember we mentioned that the first terminology, distortion, leads to ta'til, denying. So in reality, it is either denial, and then we mentioned that asking about the howness, it leads to tamtheel, resembling. So it is two that we have left, either denial or either resembling Allah to His creation. So at the end of the day, they say, Al-Mu'attil ya'budu adaman. وَالْمُمَثِّلْ يَعْبُدُ صَنَمًا. That the one who's emptying the names and attributes of Allah of having meanings, he's worshipping nothing. He's worshipping nothing. They're the same people. Yeah, maybe after the salat, they tell you, make dua, brother. And he raises his hand up. And when you ask him, where is Allah? He tell you, he's not above, he's not at the right, he's not at the left, he's not in the middle, he's not underneath. So you say, why are you raising your hand up to the sky, brother? See the play of contradiction? So, in reality, he's worshipping nothing. If Allah is not above, is not right, is not left, is not middle, is not underneath, all of what they've said, then in reality, as the scholars mentioned, they're worshipping nothing. The next part, that the mumathil is worshipping sanama, the one equating Allah to his creation of his attributes. In reality, what is he worshipping? An idol. He's worshipping an idol. So they said, whoever resembles Allah to his creation, فَقَدْ كَفَرْ. Yes, indeed, it's a serious matter. مَنْ شَبَّهَ اللَّهِ بِخَلْقِهِ فَقَدْ كَفَرْ. Whoever resembles Allah and equates Allah to his creation, he has indeed disbelieved. It's a serious topic of that can take the person out of the fold of Islam. And whoever denies the names and attributes of Allah has well disbelieved. So these two terminologies of ta'til and tamthil is what we're speaking concerning. One worshipping nothing and one worshipping an idol. And these people, from their doubts, you ask them, why do you distort? He says, they say that if we affirm this attribute of Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, we're going to liken him to his creation. We're going to liken him to his creation. He said, do not say Allah gets angry. Do not say Allah gets angry. Allah doesn't have the attribute of anger. And that Allah does not get pleased. They'll tell you, so you ask them, what is the meaning of the hadith that Allah gets angry? He tells you, iradatu al-intiqam. Allah wanting revenge. He gives you a long wording. Here you distorted it. So and then you ask him, what about pleased? Iradatu al-in'am. Allah wanting to bestow his favors. They don't want to say angered or pleased. They just say Allah wanting revenge or Allah wanting to bestow his blessings. So I believe Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah asked them, okay, this want, is it a real want or has another meaning to it too? They said, because he said if it's a real, that Allah really wanted, then why did you affirm an attribute for Allah here without distorting it, and over here you distorted it? This is the contradiction that Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah defeated them in a debate. Also, when another example of distortion, يعني وجوه يومئذ ناظرة إلى ربها وجوه يومئذ ناظرة إلى ربها ناظرة. On a day that their faces will be brightened and radiance. They'll be looking at their Lord. So they say, إِلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ نَاظِرَةً, that they'll be looking at the ni'mat rabbihim, the blessings of the Lord. Here they distort it. So these are some of their objectives. They say that if we affirm Allah being looked at of his creation, we're going to affirm that Allah will be encompassed in a certain direction. They said when a person looks at another human being in this life, you can see him from a certain dimension. So they said the same for Allah. If we affirm that we're going to see Allah, we're going to restrict him to a dimension or a certain side of where he's going to be seen. So here we say, in reality, you're running from something and you're running into it. what are they running away from? Likening Allah to His creation. And in reality, they're running into the act of resembling Allah to His creation. Because they're saying, in this life, the human, when you see him, he's the fact of being seen is restricted. Like I say right now, I've seen the brother Abu Layth on the right side of the masjid. So they're saying this happens same with Allah. When we see Allah, we're restricting Him to a certain side of an angle. So they are those who are liking Allah to the creation, although they may attest otherwise. Ta'til. As for ta'til, the reason why they do ta'til is because they say if we affirm attributes of Allah, as if we're affirming more deities, more gods. So if we say Allah has more than one attribute, we're affirming more gods. That's what they say. Ta'addud ilahat. It's not the case. And God, the more attributes it has, the more it increases in perfection. So, the more attributable names and attributes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, the more perfection is for Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. So the next, as for takyif, the reason for takyif, they have a principle for asking about the halness. They tell you, yes, the Sahabas didn't ask the Prophets about the halness of these attributes. They agree with you on that. They tell you, Madhabu Salaf Aslam. The methodology of the Salaf al-Salih is more secure and safe. We agree with you on that. The Sahabas didn't do that. These attributes, they didn't inquire about it whenever the Prophet mentioned it, when the ayats were recited. But then they say, وَلَكِنْ مَذْهَبُ الْخَلَفِ أَعْلَمْ they said, أَحْكَمْ وَأَعْلَمْ. They are more wise and more knowledgeable. Because they're inquiring about the howness and they have some sort of conclusion of how this howness is. They got something extra that the Salaf didn't have. So this is why they say we do takyif. We inquire about the howness. A man came to Imam Malik one time when he's speaking about the attributes of Allah, about istiwa, rising over the throne. So he said, كيف استوى? How did Allah arise over His throne? There then comes a narration that Imam Malik started to sweat from that question. That struck in him in sweat. It was a question that is not befitting for the creation to ask the Creator about anything that He does. لا يسأل عما يفعل وهم يسألون. Allah is not to be questioned about what He does or anything about His attributes, but rather we're to be questioned. We need to be asked about our own actions before asking about the actions of Allah. In reality, if you look at the person, how weak he is, if you were to ask him, do you know the howness of that soul in your own chest? He'll tell you no. So why do you have the howness of Allah, the Creator, the Sublime, the Creator of the 7 heavens and the 7 earths? You don't even know ruhak alladhi bayna janbayk. You don't even know the actuality of this soul. No matter who it may be, of scientists or doctors, they can't come to a correct conclusion of this soul it is, what it is, and the actual substance or whatever it may be, naturally. Even a man, I think it comes in the Salaf, a man was asking about the howness. He said, I'm going to ask you a question. It comes in narration that Jibreel has how many wings? Jibreel, how many wings does he have? 600. Okay, so he asked him, how does he fly with those 600? Kept quiet. He said, I don't know. He said, if you don't even know this about an angel, how are you going to know this about Rabbul Alameen, about his attributes? Then he said, also, I'll give you something easier. There's an angel that has, Allah says, Mathna wa Thulatha, an angel that has 3 wings. How does that angel with 3 wings fly? Because if you tell him 2 wings, he's going to give you an example. But he has 3 reasons. He couldn't answer. He said, if this is the case with an angel, then how are you going to be able to know the true essence of the attributes of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala? So that's the reason for takyif. The reason for tamtheel. Tamtheel, why they equate Allah to His creation, they say that we're actually fulfilling the tawheed of Allah. If you ask them, why are you resembling Allah to His creation? We're saying, they'll tell you, we have 4 principles or 5 principles from it, is to have tawheed. And their tawheed is different from our tawheed. Tawheed of them means to free Allah from having attributes. And the greatest proof is the ayah, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. They don't read the last part of the ayah. They wrote on the Kaaba, Ibn Abi Du'ad, he wrote in the time of Imam Ahmed, on the Kaaba, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. He didn't finish the rest of the ayah. There's nothing like to Allah. Nothing whatsoever. So they say, this means that we negate. We do whatever it means it takes to negate anything resembling Allah. That, even if it takes emptying Allah of having attributes. They said this is the greater benefit. We're carrying out the ayah, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. So they wrote on the Kaaba, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ, and they didn't finish the rest of the ayah, وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. So they went into extreme of negation. Because Ahlus-Sunnah, yes, we affirm and we negate. But we don't go to extremes in affirming, like what they have done, some of the groups, they affirmed for more from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where they end up likening Allah to His creation. Nor do we go to extremes of negation, where we end up actually negating the attributes of Allah. So these are the reasons for why they do tahrif, ta'til, and takyif, and la ta'til. We're going to see if we can repeat that, inshallah. What are one of the reasons why they do tahrif? Tahrif, why do they distort? Why does Ahl Bid'ah, the people of innovations, they distort the names and attributes of Allah? So, huh? Close, huh? What's the reason we mentioned? Who remembers? They want to avoid likening Allah to His creation. That's the reason why they distort. And we give examples. They tell them Allah has a hand. They tell you no, it means the ayah about Allah, بَلْ يَدَاهُ مَبْسُوطَتَانِ. It means Allah, hand is a blessing. It doesn't mean actual hand. That's what they say. Or they'll say the hand of Allah means qudra, capability. So you tell them, okay, the ayah says 2 hands. Does Allah have 2 capabilities? Why only 2? So these people are contradicting, but the main reason is they're trying to avoid liking Allah to His creation. That's the reason of distortion. What's the reason of ta'til that we mentioned? Why they deny some of the attributes of Allah? Hold on.
The reason why is because they believe that affirming them would be affirming different deities.
Naam. They believe that if they affirm the attributes of Allah, they'll be affirming more than one deity. So they said if more attributes basically means more gods. And that's not correct. So why did they do takyif? Why did they ask about the howness and imagine the howness of all these attributes? What's the reason? When you know the reason, you're able to get around their doubts, their shubuhat. عرفت الشر لا للشر. We don't know the evil for the sake of evil, but للتوقي, to avoid it. طيب, takyif. Why do they do takyif? Huh? Who remembers? We said that they have a principle. They say that time the Sahabas, yes, they didn't inquire, but their madhab is, mashallah, safe and secure. But the people that know the howness and come to some sort of conclusion of how the howness of these attributes, they are ahkam wa alam. They're more wise and knowledgeable. That's the reason. Is that if we come to something extra that the Sahabas didn't do, we're coming to having more knowledge. This is their belief. But what's the reason why they do tamtheel? Why do they equate Allah to some of His creation? Huh? Why do they do tamtheel? Why do they simulate Allah to some of His creation? Huh? Hold on. Yes, they believe that believing in the Tawheed of Allah, single Allah out, is to totally negate, even if it means negating His attributes. So they say we're closing all doors to associating partners with Allah. So we're going to totally go into extreme of negation. And they use the ayah, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. And they don't mention the second part of the ayah. There's nothing like to Allah, they use the ayah. طيب, if you can continue reading, inshallah. We have, just going to read a little bit more and then we'll stop there, inshallah. If you can repeat to that part, بَلْ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِأَنَّ اللَّهَ. The same ayah, and continue.
There is none like Him. He is the all-hearer and all-seer. Do not deny Him the way He has described Himself. Do not change words from their context. Do not disbelieve the names of Allah and His signs. Do not exemplify His attributes with the attributes of His creatures, because Allah the Exalted has no likeness. There is none comparable to Him. There is none equal to Him. The Exalted, the Supreme, is not measured by His creatures. Indeed, He best knows Himself and others. He is all truthful, and His speech prevails over the speech of His creatures.
The next part, he says, بَلْ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِأَنَّ اللَّهَ لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. Rather, Ahlus-Sunnahwaljamaah, they believe that there's nothing like to Him. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. And that He's all hearer and all seer. This ayah is where all the main principles of the names and attributes of Allah has been extracted from. Surah Ash-Shura, ayah 11. We take many of the principles that we have spoken about from this ayah alone. Yani Shinqiti says about this ayah, يحل جميع الإشكالات وقاعدة في الصفات. That it solves many of the problems that people come to have in the names and attributes of Allah. And it also, it's a clear principle and fundamental that a person can go back to concerning the attributes of Allah. The first thing is لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. That we negate, and at the same time we affirm. Ahlus-Sunnahwaljamaah, the second principle that we're going to take is that we affirm and we negate. We do the combination of the two. The first principle we took was that the names and attributes of Allah are tawqifiyah, they're restricted to the text. There's no room for intellect therein. The second principle is that the Shaykh is mentioning is that we affirm and negate for Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. And the first way of negation is that when we negate, we make an overall negation of all defects and deficiencies for Allah. And as we negate, we affirm for Him beautiful names and attributes. Here it says, وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. Allah is all hearing and all seer. Why was these two names mentioned together? You see that I mention often. وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. Is there a reason? In this case, because as some of the scholars mentioned, they are مُتَمَاثِلَان مُتَلَازِمَان. That one necessitates the other. Hearing necessitates the attribute of seeing. That's a God that hears as well that sees. So the same that if you were going to affirm one attribute, you're in reality in contradiction. Because these people, if you were to ask them, how is Allah? They'll tell you, SubhanAllah, brother, don't ask me that question. But when it comes to the attribute, they tell you, yes, the attribute that Allah, they tell you Allah sees like I see. You said, brother, just right there, when I asked you, how is Allah? You said, SubhanAllah. Okay, well, when it came to the attribute, he didn't say SubhanAllah too. Here he makes an exception. So, certain things that necessitate one another, you find these people in contradiction. So it's a refutation that you cannot affirm one thing and object what is connected to it. So هو السميع البصير. طيب ليس كمثله شيء وهو السميع البصير. We take from this ayah that we affirm and we negate. The third principle that we're going to take, you can write this down as well as a principle, the books of Ahlus-Sunnahwaljamaah, is that al-kalam fi sifat far'un min al-kalam fi dhat. Speaking about the attributes is branched off from speaking about Allah. Meaning it's like you're speaking about the essence of Allah. When you're speaking about one single attribute of Allah, it's like you're speaking about Allah, entirety of His essence. So, kalam fi sifatihi, kalam fi dhatihi. That's the other third principle. So, as we mentioned, when we ask them, how is Allah? They tell you, SubhanAllah. But when it comes to an attribute, He's ready to tell you how it is. He'll tell you Allah sees like I see, or hears like I hear. He won't tell you SubhanAllah. So this is the principle that they oppose, that speaking about the attributes is branched off from speaking about Allah. It's like speaking about the essence of Allah. طيب, then he went on to say, فَلَا يَنْفُونَ عَنْهُ مَا وَصَفَ بِهِ نَفْسَهُ. We still have some time, or is it a bit long? How long is the lesson so far? طيب, he goes on to say, and we do not negate what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described Himself. طيب, the attributes of Allah divide into two. Attributes that Allah has affirmed for Himself, and attributes that Allah has negated for Himself. How is that the case? The first one, attributes that Allah has affirmed for Himself. That He hears, that He sees, that is clear. But attributes that He has negated for Himself. Huh? لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم. He negated that He sleeps. He negated فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى الْحَيِّ الَّذِي لَا يَمُوتُ, that He doesn't die. So when we negate an attribute that Allah has negated for Himself, what do? We affirm the opposite. We affirm the opposite. So when we affirm that Allah does not die, what are we affirming? That He's ever living. MashaAllah. This is the meaning of the attributes of Allah divided into one that He has affirmed for Himself, and another that he has denied it or he has negated for himself. So, for example, Allah has negated that He is one that oppresses. وَمَا رَبُّكَ بِظَلَّامٍ لِلْعَبِيدِ. Allah does not oppress His servants. So we say, this is from the attributes of Allah. When we negate this, what are we affirming? The opposite is Kamal Adlihi, that He has complete justice. So remember, the attributes of Allah divide into two. Ones that He has affirmed for Himself and one that He has negated. Bear with me, explaining this dars requires a lot of interactions. Requires a lot of back and forth examples. Because misunderstanding one single part from this could be very sensitive, especially with the names and attributes of Allah. So, you will find a lot of the books in Aqidah, section of the libraries, a lot of them have to do with the names and attributes of Allah. This field is very important. Scholars have given it much attention of their works. The names and attributes of Allah. طيب ولا يحرفون الكلم عن مواضعه, and they do not distort a word from its proper place. The first to come with the act of tahrif, the terminology we took, the distortion. Who was the first to come with it? Who? Before them. Allah says in the Quran, يُحَرِّفُونَ الْكَلِمْ عَنْ مَوَاضِعِهِ. Like for example, قُولُوا حِطَّةٌ. Allah says to the Jews, the children of Israel, they then, when they were told, say, قُولُوا حِطَّةٌ نَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ خَطَايَاكُمْ. We will forgive for you your sins. Hitta means remove from us our load of sins. Uplift this load of sins from us. Say that when you're entering. So instead they said hinta. They didn't say hitta. They said hinta. Hinta is the word of mockery. They just changed the word. They added a letter noon in between. So Allah says, يُحَرِّفُونَ الْكَلِمَ عَنْ مَوَاضِعِهِ. They distort the word from its proper state. So the first to come with this tradition was the children of Israel who turned away from the commandments that were found in the book. So whoever follows them in this act of tahrif, who is their leader? Who is their imam? That's the original imam that they followed in this affair. طيب ولا يحيدون في أسمائه وآياته ولا يكيفون ولا يمثلون. Nor do they do ilhad. Nor do they have any corrupted beliefs concerning the names and the signs of Allah. An example is how the people of the scripture used to take some of the names of Allah and alter it and change it. For example, there'll be Al-Aziz, they'll say Al-Uzza. They have called their idol Al-Uzza. The name of Allah, Al-Aziz, the Almighty, they'll change it to Al-Uzza, and they'll name their idol with it. This is from their corrupted beliefs. There's a lot of examples of that. Even now, what people name Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with, of names that He hasn't named Himself, this is from Ilhad. And also of His signs. Nor do they ask how, nor do they resemble His creation nor do they resemble His attributes to the attributes of His creation. طيب, inshallah, we will stop here. I believe what we took today was sufficient. We took today two main groups that their name is going to often be mentioned, the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila, who they are. We took three main principles. So we believe three main principles in the names and attributes of Allah. What's the first? the names and attributes of Allah restricted text. There's no way of naming Allah or describing Allah except if you have a text from the Quran and the Sunnah. You cannot describe Allah from what you have in your mind or what you've seen in a dream or what you may assume, perceive, what people may find in cartoons and just give a name of Allah. La. The next affair was the second principle. What's the second principle that we took? Follow. The Ahlus-Sunnah affirm and negate. So they negate the deficiencies from Allah and they affirm perfection for Allah. What's the third principle that we took? Mawlid. Speaking of Allah's attributes is like speaking about His essence. So the same things that you won't say about His essence, you can't say about His attributes. There's no way of separating His attributes from His essence. So this is the summary. We also mention the reasons why people fall into those four terminologies, and we summarize them to two, either denial or either to equating Allah. And we end with this. We ask Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala to pardon us for our shortcomings. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. I believe we already prolonged. I don't think there's any more questions. طيب إن شاء الله we'll stop here. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك.